The stars had always been quiet. For 6,000 years, the Confederacy had ruled the Orion arm of the galaxy without any real challenge. They were an alliance of 12 different species, all of them powerful, all of them hungry for more worlds to control. Their fleets moved from system to system like a great wave, taking what they wanted and crushing anyone who stood in their way. When their long-range probes found a small blue planet near the edge of explored space, they saw nothing special. The world was pretty, yes. It had oceans and forests and mountains. It had life. But the beings who lived there were primitive. They had only recently learned to leave their own atmosphere. Their radio signals were weak and scattered. Their weapons were laughable. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and looked at the images of Earth on his display screen. He was old by standards, his gray skin marked with the scars of 100 campaigns. He had conquered worlds that fought back with everything they had. This small planet would not even be a challenge. "How many ships should we send?" his second officer asked. Smiled, showing his sharp teeth. 300 should be enough. We will give them a chance to surrender. If they refuse, we will burn their cities until they change their minds. The fleet gathered at the edge of Earth's solar system. 312 capital ships, each one a kilometer long. 4,000 smaller support craft followed behind them. It was enough firepower to crack a planet in half. They sent their message to Earth on every frequency. The translation was simple: surrender everything, give up all weapons, and hand over all resources to the Confederacy. The humans had 12 hours to accept. Far below, in a bunker deep beneath the city of Seoul, Commander Park watched the alien ships appear on her screens. She was 42 years old, with short black hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her entire career had been spent preparing for something like this. Most politicians had called her crazy. Most generals had said she was wasting her time. None of them were laughing now. "How many ships?" she asked, her voice calm and steady. Lieutenant pulled up the satellite data. He was young, barely 30, but his hands did not shake as he worked. 312 capital ships, about 4,000 support craft. Nodded slowly. It was worse than their worst predictions, but not impossible. President addressed the United Nations in an emergency meeting. He was an old man with white hair and a gentle face, but there was steel in his voice as he spoke. "They believe we are afraid," he said. "They believe we will kneel before them and beg for mercy. They do not understand what we are. They do not know what humanity has survived to reach this moment." The 12 hours passed. Earth sent no response. Admiral was confused at first, then angry. These primitive creatures dared to ignore the Confederacy. They would learn their mistakes soon enough. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Target their largest cities. Show them what happens to those who defy us." The ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. Their weapons fired, and the world began to burn. New York was hit first. The great towers of glass and steel melted under beams of pure energy. Millions of people ran through the streets, screaming, trying to escape the fire that fell from the sky. London followed, then Beijing, then Mumbai. The aliens did not care about military targets. They wanted to cause fear. They wanted to break humanity's spirit. In Seoul, Commander Park watched the feeds from around the world. She saw the death. She saw the destruction. 11 million people died in the first 3 hours of the attack. Captain Lee stood beside her. He was the head of special operations, a quiet man who rarely showed any emotion, but even he looked pale as he watched the cities burn. "Are they in position?" asked. Checked his displays. "All 12 stations report ready. Project Prometheus is fully online." Project Prometheus, the secret that had been kept for over 60 years, the weapon that humanity had prayed they would never need to use. Closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about her daughter, who lived in with her husband. She thought about the world she had known, the world that was dying in fire and ash above her. She thought about all the people who would never come home. Then she opened her eyes. "Begin," she said. In orbit around Earth, hidden behind advanced camouflage that made them invisible to all sensors, 12 massive platforms came to life. They had been built in secret over 3 decades, using technology that no human should have possessed. Technology recovered from an alien ship that had crashed in Siberia long before the ever-new Earth existed. The first platform locked onto a group of 47 warships. Deep inside its core, something ancient and terrible began to spin. Energy built up, more energy than 100 nuclear bombs combined, focused into a single point. The null lance fired. There was no sound in space. There was no explosion, no flash of light. One moment, 47 warships hung in the darkness above Earth. The next moment, they simply were not there anymore. They did not break apart. They did not burn. They just stopped existing, as if someone had erased them from reality itself. Admiral stared at his display in disbelief. The ships had not been destroyed. They had been deleted. His sensors could not even find debris. "What happened?" he demanded. "What weapon is this?" Before anyone could answer, 11 more lances fired at the same time. The fleet had arrived with over 300 capital ships. In less than 2 minutes, they lost more than 200 of them. Ships vanished in silence, leaving nothing behind but empty space where they had been. Panic spread through the remaining fleet. Captains screamed orders to retreat. Ships turned and fled toward the edge of the solar system, their engines burning at maximum power. They no longer cared about Earth or its resources. They only wanted to escape. But Commander Park was not finished. Her voice broadcast across every frequency, translated into the language of the by-computers that had spent decades learning alien speech. "You came to our world believing us weak," she said. "You murdered our people believing there would be no consequence. You were wrong." The final null lance targeted the Eternal Conquest directly. Admiral had just enough time to understand his mistake. He had seen Earth as a primitive world full of primitive creatures. He had not stopped to wonder how those creatures had survived for so long on a world that tried to kill them every day. The lance fired, and his entire crew vanished from existence. Only 23 ships managed to escape Earth's solar system. They carried stories of weapons that could erase matter itself, of a small blue world that had turned into a death trap, of primitive creatures who had somehow become the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever seen. The war for Earth had lasted less than a day. Humanity had won. But Park knew this was only the beginning. The Confederacy would return. Other species would hear of Earth and come to test its defenses. The galaxy was full of predators, and now they all knew that humanity existed. She looked up at the sky, at the stars that had always seemed so peaceful and distant. "Let them come," she whispered. "Let them all come. Earth would be ready." The 23 ships that escaped from Earth carried more than survivors. They carried fear. A fear so deep and so complete that it would spread through the entire Confederacy like a disease. Captain was one of the few officers who made it out alive. His ship had been at the back of the fleet when the strange weapons began firing. He had watched 200 of his fellow captains vanish in an instant, their ships disappearing without any explosion or debris. It was as if the universe itself had decided they should no longer exist. When he finally reached the nearest Confederacy base, he could barely speak. The commanders there thought he had gone mad. How could a primitive species destroy the greatest fleet the Confederacy had ever assembled? How could they possess weapons that made no sense according to any known science? But then the sensor logs were reviewed. The evidence was clear. Earth had defended itself with technology that should not exist. The news spread quickly through the galaxy. Within weeks, every major civilization knew what had happened. The mighty Confederacy had attacked a small, unknown world and had been crushed like insects under a boot. The balance of power that had existed for thousands of years suddenly felt very fragile. Back on Earth, the survivors began to pick up the pieces of their broken world. 11 million people had died in the attack. Entire cities had been reduced to ash and rubble. Families searched through the ruins, hoping to find loved ones who would never come home. The grief was overwhelming, a weight that pressed down on every human heart. But there was also pride, and anger, and a cold determination that burned brighter than any alien weapon. Commander Park became a symbol of human resistance. Images of her standing in the command bunker, giving the order to fire, spread across every news network. She did not want to be a hero. She had only done what needed to be done. But the world needed someone to believe in, and so she accepted the role. 3 weeks after the attack, she stood before the World Council and explained the truth about Project Prometheus. In 2089, a damaged alien ship crashed in Siberia, she said. The Russian government found it first, but within a year, every major nation knew about the discovery. We agreed to work together in secret. We spent decades studying the technology we found inside that ship. The room was silent. Most of the council members had never heard of the crash. The secret had been kept by only a handful of people in each generation. Dr. Song stepped forward. She was 67 years old, a physicist who had devoted her entire life to understanding the alien technology. Her hair was gray, her hands were wrinkled, but her mind was as sharp as ever. The ship contained plans for a weapon, she explained. We did not fully understand how it worked, not at first. It took us 30 years just to build a prototype. The weapon does not destroy matter in the normal sense. It attacks the fundamental forces that hold atoms together. When those forces fail, matter simply stops existing. She paused, her eyes heavy with the weight of what she had created. We called it the Null Lance. It is the most terrible weapon ever made, and we built 12 of them. The council members exchanged nervous glances. They had all seen what the Null Lances could do. They had watched the footage of ships vanishing into nothing. The power to erase matter from existence was not just a weapon. It was the power of gods. President stood up slowly. He looked older than he had before the attack, as if the last few weeks had aged him by decades. We kept this secret because we hoped we would never need to use it, he said. We knew that if the galaxy discovered what we had, they would see us as a threat. They would try to destroy us before we became too powerful. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every council member. They forced our hand. They attacked without warning, without mercy. They killed millions of our people. We had no choice but to reveal what we could do. Park nodded in agreement. She stepped forward again, her voice strong and clear. The galaxy knows about us now. They know we have weapons that can destroy anything. Some of them will be afraid. Some of them will want to make peace, but others will see us as a challenge. They will want to test our strength to see if we are truly as dangerous as we appear. She let her words sink in before continuing. We must send a message to all of them, a message so clear that no one can misunderstand. Earth is not a target. Earth is not weak. Any species that attacks us will face the same fate as the fleet. The council agreed. A diplomatic mission would be sent to the heart of the galaxy, to the great assembly where representatives of hundreds of species gathered to discuss matters of interstellar importance. Humanity would introduce itself to the galaxy, not as victims, but as equals. Ambassador Jin was chosen to lead the mission. He was a former diplomat who had survived the attack on Seoul. His wife and daughter had not been so lucky. They had been visiting New York when they began their bombardment. There was nothing left of them to bury. Jin accepted the mission without hesitation. He had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. His translator would be a young woman who had spent years studying alien languages from the intercepted signals Earth had been collecting for decades. She was only 28, but she had a gift for communication that went beyond mere words. She could read emotions in the way beings moved and spoke, even when those beings were nothing like humans. The diplomatic ship, named the Hope of Earth, was built in record time. It was not a warship, but it carried enough sensors and shields to survive almost any attack. More importantly, it carried the plans for the Null Lance, ready to be displayed to anyone who doubted humanity's power. Before the ship launched, Park met with Jin one final time. "You understand what you must do?" she asked. Jin nodded. "I must make them understand that we will not be victims. I must make them fear us but also respect us. I must show them that humans want peace but will accept war if forced." Studied his face. She saw the grief there, buried deep beneath layers of duty and purpose. She saw the anger that he kept under tight control. She saw a man who would do whatever was necessary to protect his people. "The galaxy has seen many powerful species," she said. "They have seen empires rise and fall. They think they understand strength, but they have never met anything like us." She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Show them what we are. Show them why humanity has survived everything this universe has thrown at us. Show them why we are still standing when so many others have fallen." Jin met her eyes. In that moment, he was not just a diplomat. He was the voice of 11 million dead, the representative of a species that had been underestimated for the last time. "I will," he said. "I will make them remember." The Hope of Earth launched 3 days later. It carried 4 diplomats, 20 crew members, and the weight of human history on its shoulders. As it accelerated toward the distant stars, billions of people on Earth watched and prayed. They had survived the first attack. They had shown the galaxy their strength, but the real test was still to come. The real test would be making peace with species who saw them as nothing more than dangerous animals. Jin stood at the window of his quarters, watching the stars streak past. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, a galaxy full of ancient civilizations waited to meet humanity for the first time. He thought of his wife. He thought of his daughter. He thought of all the people who had died so that this moment could happen. "We are coming," he whispered to the stars, "and you will never forget us." The Hope of Earth flew on, carrying humanity's message into the unknown. The Galactic Assembly Station was the largest structure Jin had ever seen. It hung in space like a small moon, covered in lights and docking ports and antenna arrays that stretched for kilometers. Ships of every shape and size moved around it like fish swimming around a reef. Some were sleek and elegant. Others were bulky and industrial. A few were so strange that Jin could not even guess what species had built them. Stood beside him at the observation window, her eyes wide with wonder. She had spent her whole life studying alien cultures from a distance. Now she was about to meet them face to face. "Are you ready?" Jin asked. Swallowed nervously. "I have been preparing for this my whole life, but I do not think anyone can truly be ready for something like this." Jin nodded. He felt the same way, but he could not show his fear. He was the voice of humanity now. He had to be strong. The Hope of Earth docked at a port reserved for new species. A group of aliens was waiting for them, beings of different shapes and colors who served as guides and translators for the assembly. They looked at the human ship with obvious curiosity. News of Earth's victory over the had spread far and wide. Everyone wanted to see the primitive creatures who had done the impossible. Jin stepped off the ship first, followed by the rest of his diplomatic team. The air inside the station smelled strange, a mixture of scents from dozens of different worlds. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth normal, making every step feel like a small bounce. The lead guide was a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. Its name was something unpronounceable, but it asked Jin to call it. "Welcome to the assembly," said through a translation device. "You are the first humans to visit our station. There is much curiosity about your species." "And much fear, I imagine," Jin replied. paused for a moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, fear as well. They were a powerful force in this part of the galaxy. You destroyed their fleet in minutes. Many species are wondering if you will try to do the same to them. Jin looked around at the other aliens watching from a distance. He could see the worry in their body language, the way they kept their distance, the way their eyes never left him. "We did not start that fight," he said clearly. "They attacked us without any warning. They killed millions of our people. We defended ourselves." "And you did so very effectively," said. There was a hint of something in its voice that Jin could not quite identify. Respect, perhaps, or maybe just nervous interest. The assembly chamber was enormous. It was a circular room the size of a stadium, with seats arranged in rising levels around a central platform. Over 200 species were represented here, some sitting in groups, others standing alone. The air was filled with the buzz of translation devices and the murmur of countless conversations. When Jin walked to the central platform, the room fell silent. He stood there for a moment, looking up at the assembled representatives. So many different faces, so many different eyes, all watching him. He thought about what Commander Park had told him before he left. "Show them what we are." "My name is Jin," he began, his voice amplified by the chamber systems. "I am here as the ambassador of Earth and the representative of humanity." The translations rippled through the room in dozens of different languages. Jin waited for them to finish before continuing. "3 months ago, the Confederacy sent a fleet to my world. They did not come to talk. They did not come to trade. They came to conquer. They gave us 12 hours to surrender everything we had or face destruction." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the audience. "We did not surrender. We had done nothing wrong. We had threatened no one. We were minding our own business on our small planet, unaware that the galaxy even knew we existed, and yet they decided we should be slaves or corpses." Some of the representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had been widely respected, even feared. To hear their actions described so plainly was unsettling. "When we did not respond to their demands, they attacked our cities," Jin continued. "They burned New York. They burned London. They burned Mumbai and Beijing, and 11 million of my people died in those first hours." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device. At his touch, a holographic image appeared above him, showing Earth as seen from space. The image zoomed in to show the 12 Prometheus platforms orbiting in secret. "We did not want to reveal what we could do. We had hoped to keep our weapons hidden, to live in peace without anyone knowing what we were capable of, but they gave us no choice." The image changed, showing schematics of the null lance. Technical data scrolled across the display, numbers and equations that most of the representatives could not understand. "This is the null lance," Jin said. "It is a weapon that does not destroy matter, it erases it. When the lance fires, the target does not explode. It does not burn, it simply stops existing. Nothing remains, not even atoms." The room was completely silent now. Jin could feel the fear spreading through the audience like a cold wind. "We used these weapons against the fleet. In less than 2 minutes, we destroyed over 200 of their warships. The survivors fled. They will never threaten Earth again." He lowered the device, and the holographic images disappeared. "I am not here to threaten you," Jin said, his voice softer now. "I am not here to demand anything. Humanity does not want war. We do not want conquest. We want only to live in peace, to trade with other species, to learn from them and share what we know." He looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as he could. "But I must also give you a warning. This is the only warning you will ever receive from humanity." The chamber seemed to hold its breath. "Any attack on Earth, any attack on our ships, any attack on our people will be answered with the full power of our weapons. We will not negotiate. We will not show mercy. We will not stop until the threat is completely and permanently removed." Jin's voice hardened, becoming something cold and sharp. They thought we were primitive. They thought we were weak. They were wrong. Do not make the same mistake they did. Do not test our resolve. Do not assume that because we want peace, we are afraid of war. He took a deep breath before delivering his final words. Humans have survived ice ages that covered our world in frozen death. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have survived wars where we nearly destroyed ourselves. We are still here. We will always be here. And anyone who threatens us will learn why. He bowed slightly to the assembly. This is humanity's introduction to the galaxy. We come in peace, but we will leave in fire if that is what you force us to choose. The silence lasted for a long time after Jin finished speaking. Then, slowly, the representatives began to murmur among themselves. Some looked angry, some looked scared. A few looked thoughtful, as if they were seeing humanity in a new light. Met Jin at the edge of the platform. Her face was pale, but her eyes were bright with pride. "That was incredible," she whispered. Jin shook his head. "That was only the beginning. Now the real work starts. We have to turn fear into respect. We have to make them see us as partners, not just threats." He looked out at the assembly, at the hundreds of species who were now aware of humanity for the first time. "We have a long way to go," he said, "but at least now they know we exist, and they will never forget." The Hope of Earth remained at the assembly station for 3 months. During that time, Jin and his team met with representatives from dozens of species. Some wanted to form alliances. Some wanted trade agreements. A few wanted nothing to do with humans at all. But none of them forgot the warning Jin had given. Earth was no longer unknown. Earth was no longer weak, and the galaxy would have to learn to live with that new reality. 5 years passed after the attack. In that time, humanity spread beyond Earth for the first time. Colony ships carried settlers to 3 new worlds, and mining operations began in a dozen star systems. The technology recovered from the alien crash, and the knowledge gained from the Null Lances helped humans build faster ships, better shields, and more powerful engines. Earth joined the galactic community as a trading partner and a diplomatic presence. Alien visitors came to see the planet that had defeated the human. Tourists traveled to other worlds, amazed by the wonders of the galaxy. For a while, it seemed like Ambassador Jin's dream of peaceful coexistence might actually come true. But not everyone in the galaxy believed that humans were as dangerous as they claimed. The Dominion controlled 17 star systems on the outer edge of known space. They were a warrior species, tall and strong, with thick gray skin and eyes that burned with constant aggression. Their entire civilization was built on conquest. They took what they wanted and destroyed anyone who stood in their way. High Commander led the Dominion with an iron fist. He had heard the stories about Earth and its strange weapons. He had watched the footage of the fleet disappearing into nothing, but he did not believe it. "They were weak," he declared to his war council. "Their fleet was old and their tactics were foolish. These humans defeated them through luck and trickery, nothing more." His generals nodded in agreement. None of them dared to challenge the High Commander's opinion. "I want to test these humans," continued. "I want to see if their weapons are real or just clever illusions. We will send a force to one of their colonies. If they truly have the power they claim, they will destroy our ships. If not, we will know they are liars and we can conquer them at our leisure." The target he chose was a colony world called New. It was a small settlement, only 5 years old, with a population of about 50,000 humans. The colony had a small defense force, but nothing that could stand against a real military attack. General Wu Han, commander of Earth's Deep Space Fleet, received intelligence about the movements. His sources told him that a large force was gathering near New, preparing for something. He brought this information to President Park, who had taken office after President retired. She was younger than her predecessor, only 45 years old, but she had the same steel in her eyes that had defined human leadership since the attack. "How many ships are they gathering?" she asked. "Our estimates suggest at least 2,000 warships," Wu replied, "possibly more." Park studied the tactical display on her desk. Nu was a small colony on the edge of human space. It would take weeks for the main fleet to reach it. "Can we reinforce them in time?" "We can send the third fleet," Wu said. "About 600 ships. They can arrive before the attack, but they will be heavily outnumbered." The president was silent for a long moment. Then she looked up, her expression hard. "Send the third fleet, and begin warming the Prometheus platforms. If they want to test us, we will give them a test they will never forget." Captain Bora Shin was in command of Nu's defense garrison when the warning came. She was 38 years old, a career officer who had joined the military after the attack killed her parents in Mumbai. She had spent years preparing for the day when another enemy would come. Now that day had arrived. She gathered her officers in the command center and explained the situation. They were coming with overwhelming force. Reinforcements were on the way, but they might not arrive in time. Their job was to hold the line as long as possible and protect the civilian population. "We have evacuation protocols in place," she told them. "Our priority is getting the colonists to safety. Every transport that escapes is a victory. Every hour we buy them is precious." Her officers nodded. They were all scared. They all knew the odds were against them, but none of them ran, none of them asked to leave. They were human soldiers and they would do their duty. The fleet arrived 3 weeks later. 2,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and formed a wall of metal and weapons around Nu. Their commander, Admiral, sent a simple message to the colony: "Surrender or die." Bora Shin did not reply. Instead, she ordered the evacuation to begin. Transport ships launched from every landing pad on the planet. Families who had come to Nu seeking a better life now ran for their lives, carrying only what they could hold. Children cried. Parents prayed. The sky above them filled with the shapes of alien warships. The garrison's defense ships launched to meet the enemy. They were outnumbered more than 50 to 1, but they fought anyway. Captain Shin led from the front, her ship diving into the formation, firing at anything that moved. The battle was short and brutal. The garrison ships were destroyed one by one, their pilots dying with weapons blazing. But they bought time, precious time that allowed more transports to escape. When her ship was finally crippled, Bora Shin crashed it onto the surface near the last evacuation point. She climbed out of the wreckage, grabbed a rifle, and joined the ground forces holding the landing zone. They began landing their own troops. Thousands of warriors poured out of, their weapons cutting down anyone who stood against them. The human defenders fell back, step by step, fighting for every meter of ground. Bora Shin stood at the center of the final defensive line. Around her, soldiers fired until their weapons overheated, then grabbed whatever they could find and kept fighting. They knew they were going to die. They did not care. Every second they held was another second for the transports to get away. The last transport lifted off with 10,000 civilians aboard. Bora watched it rise into the sky, a smile crossing her bloody face. "They made it," she whispered. "They made it." A warrior appeared in front of her, its weapon raised. Bora did not flinch. She looked into its burning eyes and felt no fear. "You think you have won," she said, "but you have no idea what you have done." The warrior fired. Bora Shin fell. 30,000 civilians escaped from Nu. 20,000 more died when they overran the colony. Captain Shin and her entire garrison were killed to the last soldier. When General Wu Han received news of the attack, he was standing in the command center of the Earth Defense Fleet. He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of all the people who had just died, thinking of the captain who had given her life to save as many as she could. Then he opened his eyes and spoke 2 words. Activate Prometheus. The order was transmitted instantly to the 12 orbital platforms. Within minutes, they began to move, their massive engines pushing them toward jump coordinates that would take them to space. President Park appeared on the main screen, her face cold and hard. "You have authorization to proceed," she said. "No mercy, no negotiation, wipe them out." Wu Han nodded. "What about their civilian population? They have billions of people on their worlds." The president's eyes did not waver. "They killed 20,000 of ours. They tortured and murdered Captain Shin and her soldiers. They tested our resolve, and now they will learn the price." She paused for a moment, then continued. "We warned them. Jin stood before the entire galaxy and told them what would happen if anyone attacked us. They did not listen. That is their fault, not ours." General Wu Han turned to his officers. Every face in the room was grim, but determined. "Prepare the null lances for maximum deployment," he ordered. "Target every military installation in space, every shipyard, every weapon factory, every warship." He thought of Bora Shin, standing alone at the end, smiling because she had saved her people. "Leave nothing behind." The Prometheus platforms jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying the most destructive weapons in the galaxy toward their targets. They had wanted to test humanity's resolve. They were about to get their answer. The Dominion had existed for over 3,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, enslaved dozens of species, and built an empire that stretched across 17 star systems. Their military was legendary. Their warriors were feared throughout the galaxy. They ceased to exist in 6 hours. Admiral Sung commanded the Prometheus strike group. He was 53 years old, a veteran of the original attack who had lost his entire family when the aliens bombed his. He had spent every day since then waiting for the chance to strike back at someone, anyone, who dared to hurt his people. Now that chance had come. The 12 Prometheus platforms dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of space. They were invisible to sensors, hidden behind the same camouflage technology that had protected them for decades. They had no idea death had arrived at their door. Sung studied the tactical display, watching the locations of military installations light up across the sector. Shipyards, weapons factories, training bases, fleet anchorages, thousands of targets all marked for destruction. "Admiral," his tactical officer said, "all platforms report ready. Null lances are fully charged." Sung thought about Captain Bora Shin. He had never met her, but he had read her file. She had been a good officer, a brave soldier, a leader who put her people before herself. She had died holding a rifle, buying time for civilians to escape. He thought about the 20,000 people who had not escaped, the families who had been killed, the children who would never grow up. "Begin," he said. The null lances fired. There was the first target. It was a massive planet, twice the size of Earth, covered in cities and factories and military bases. 40 billion beings lived there, most of them warriors or their families. The first lance struck the planet's largest military complex. One moment, a structure the size of a mountain stood on the surface. The next moment, there was nothing but empty ground. The second lance hit the main shipyard in orbit. 100 warships under construction vanished without a trace. High Commander was in his palace when the attack began. He watched the reports come in with growing disbelief. His installations were disappearing. His ships were being erased. The weapons he had dismissed as tricks and illusions were real, and they were tearing his empire apart. "Send everything we have against them," he screamed. "Find those platforms and destroy them." But there was nothing to find. The Prometheus platforms were invisible, moving through space like ghosts, firing their lances at targets hundreds of kilometers away. The fleet scrambled to respond, but they were shooting at shadows. One by one, the military installations fell. The shipyards, the weapon factories, the training bases, the defense platforms. Everything the had built over 3,000 years was wiped away in minutes. Then the Null Lances turned to the fleets. They had tens of thousands of warships spread across their empire. They were the pride of the Dominion, symbols of military might that had never known defeat. They died without ever firing a shot. Admiral, the commander who had ordered the attack on Nu, was aboard his flagship when the lance struck. He had just received orders to return home and defend the Empire. He never got the chance to follow them. His ship and everyone aboard simply stopped existing. Sung watched the tactical display as target after target went dark. He felt no joy, no satisfaction, only a cold emptiness that had been with him since the day his family died. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we are receiving a transmission from the. They are requesting a ceasefire." Sung shook his head slowly. "We do not accept ceasefires. We gave them a warning. They ignored it. Now they face the consequences." "Sir, they are begging. Their High Commander himself is on the channel." For a moment, Sung considered responding. He thought about what it would mean to show mercy, to accept surrender, to prove that humans were better than the monsters who had killed his family. Then he thought about Bora Shin, standing alone at the end, dying with a smile on her face. "Continue firing," he said, "until there is nothing left." The died last. The Null Lances did not target the cities directly. That was not necessary. Instead, they targeted the power stations, the water treatment plants, the food distribution centers. They destroyed everything that kept the civilian population alive. Within weeks, the survivors would begin to starve. Within months, the planet would be a tomb. High Commander never saw the end. His palace was hit by a direct strike while he was still screaming orders into a communications system that no longer worked. He vanished along with everyone around him, erased from existence as if he had never been born. When it was over, Sung stood alone on the bridge of his command ship. The tactical display was empty. Every military target in space had been eliminated. Every warship, every soldier, every weapon. The Dominion was not conquered, it was erased. The news spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had watched from the sidelines, wondering if the humans were really as dangerous as they claimed, now had their answer. They had tested humanity's resolve, and they had paid the ultimate price. Ambassador Jin returned to the Galactic Assembly one final time. The chamber was packed, every seat filled with representatives who wanted to hear what the humans would say. The air was thick with fear and tension. Jin walked to the central platform. He looked older now, worn down by years of diplomacy and the weight of what his species had done. He had wanted peace. He had tried to build bridges between humans and other species, but some bridges could only be built with fire. "The Dominion no longer exists," he said quietly. "Their military is gone. Their empire is shattered. 60 billion beings died because their leaders refused to heed our warning." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives who could barely stand to look at him. "We did not want this. We begged for peace. We warned of the consequences. Jin stood in this very chamber 5 years ago and told you exactly what would happen if anyone attacked us." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. They did not believe. They thought we were bluffing. They thought no species could truly be capable of such destruction. He shook his head slowly. "You still do not understand what humans are. We are a species that burned our own cities to win wars. We split the atom and used it against ourselves. We came within minutes of destroying our entire planet a dozen times before we ever reached the stars." Jin's eyes swept across the assembly. "Destruction is not something we fear. It is something we have lived with since the day we first learned to make fire." He turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, he paused and looked back one last time. "Remember Nu. Remember Captain Shin. Remember that for every human life taken, we will answer with 10 million of yours." His final words echoed through the silent chamber. We do not give second warnings. 200 years passed after the annihilation. In that time, no species ever raised weapons against humanity. Earth grew into a thriving interstellar civilization, its people spread across 40 worlds. The Null Lances still orbited, silent and watchful, a reminder of what humans were capable of. Elder was the oldest living human at 237 years. Medical technology had extended human far beyond what anyone in the old days could have imagined. She had been a child during the attack, and she remembered the fear of those days, the smoke and fire, the screaming in the streets. She also remembered what came after, the rebuilding, the expansion, the long peace that followed the annihilation. Sometimes she visited the memorial on Nu. The planet had been rebuilt, its cities gleaming under twin suns, its people prosperous and safe. At the center of the main city stood a statue of Captain Bora Shin, her hand raised in defiance, her face calm and determined. The inscription beneath read, "She held the line, we held our promise." Young aliens sometimes visited the memorial. Teachers brought them to learn about human history, to understand why the galaxy had been at peace for so long. They would stand before the statue and stare up at the human woman who had died so that others could live. One day, a young alien approached Elder. It was descended from the survivors who had surrendered after the original attack. Its species had lived peacefully alongside humans for generations. "Why are humans so willing to destroy?" the young one asked. "You could have negotiated with you could have found another way." Smiled, her ancient eyes distant with memory. "We are not willing to destroy," she said. "We are willing to protect. There is a difference." The young alien did not understand. Perhaps no alien ever would. But they remembered. And Earth remained safe. Somewhere in orbit, the Null Lances continued their endless watch. They had not fired in 2 centuries. Perhaps they would never fire again. But they were there, waiting, ready. A final warning that needed no words. A promise that would never be broken. And a species that the galaxy had learned, at terrible cost, to never underestimate again.